So this is my review of XesRays Combatants line. So on the left-hand side, her name is Vlattia, Berenice, and Tadala. And this is a pretty late review, but I do know that this company has more figures lined up. And I just wanted to review these three figures because I've been wanting to review them for a long time. So to summarize, I like these figures just because they have that whole swords and sandals aesthetic, and I like the whole gladiator theme, but they have some very, very serious issues, and they definitely need to be kind of discussed. So we'll start with aesthetics first. In terms of overall height, these figures stand at pretty much exactly, and I'm not counting her plume here, 6.5 inch. So these are 6.5 inch figures. If you want a good measure on their weight, let's take a look. And yeah, they do feel good in the hand. Pretty heavy. Let's zero that in. Yeah, they're pretty beefy. So 3.74 ounces. They're all on the same body, just different colors, so pretty much the same. 3.67 ounces. You get the idea. Yeah, these figures, they look pretty great. Armor, everything like that looks very crisp, nice coloration. On Tadala and what's her face, Vlattia right here, colors are great, excellent detail all over her armor. Can't complain. Skin tone is pretty even throughout. Facial expression, a bit bland for a gladiator, but maybe could have spruced that up a bit. But can't complain too much. Still looks great overall. She looks very bored for someone who's, essentially slaughtering people for a living. Other than that, yeah, she looks pretty great. Now, some things that did kind of come up as a little sloppy is just when you take the armor off. You'll notice kind of like smudges and things on them. And that is a bit of a pain. I got most of them off on mine, but be aware that there was kind of like markings all over her leg. So I had to take that off with like alcohol. Again, these figures aren't exactly cheap, so I didn't like that too much, but be aware of that. So they do come off, so it's not a huge issue. One other thing that kind of griped me was the joints. So they really don't know how to put paint on the joints, because if you can see that right there, the paint already came off, and there's really no way around that. So if you pose your figures even a little bit, it's going to come off. And yeah, they'll give you a note that says, be careful, warm your figures before posing or paint will come off. Trust me when I say that's all just bullshit. That's just them covering themselves. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. Joints are going to have to stand up to abuse. So you can't just give a piece of paper that says warm your figures and say that protects against paint chip, because it doesn't. And that's bullshit. So don't put in a piece of paper like that, because that insults your buyers. Okay, so be aware of that. Not a huge issue for me, but, be aware of it. So that will happen to your figure pretty much. Unless they fix this for like the new waves, which I kind of doubt they did, but who knows. So be aware of that. And just to put her sandal back on, overall aesthetics, still pretty good. I'd give it a 4.5 out of 5. And if we just look at Berenice, the gold on her armor looks great. Very unique. And this one in particular is probably my favorite. She reminds me of Xena. And if you grew up in the 90s, you know who that is. Very, very nice looking armor here. The gold is excellent. So like I said, this company is doing good things, but they have to kind of do some overhauls. But yeah, Berenice looks great. Same issue. So when her armor comes off, yeah, she had smudges on her. And again, with the joints, yeah, paint will come off. So be ready for that if you buy these figures. Tadala is definitely one of the most unique. I'm actually extremely pleased that they made a character from Carthage. And if you know anything about Roman history, you know that they're badasses. She looks great. So the dark skin tone is very unique. I really like that. And yeah, she looks great overall. The dark skin tone with the gold, very unique for a figure. You don't see a lot of figures that look like this. So that looks great. easily probably my second favorite of the bunch. Armor is very unique. It looks like something you'd see from an exotic place like Carthage. And if you watch the movie Gladiator, you could probably guess that they got some inspiration from that for her armor, which is very cool. For aesthetics, yeah, 4.5 out of 5. Faces could be a little bit more interesting, like wake up a bit. And in terms of the joints, a little ugly to look at. And paint smears and things like that on the leg, but since they're not permanent, yeah, 4.5 out of 5. So these figures look great. In terms of articulation, we'll just get right into it. So head is on a ball joint, good enough movement. You could look down that much. She could look up that much. Ball joint on the upper diaphragm. Excellent backwards movement. She could look forward pretty well. Arms come straight out. And be aware of the armor. Don't force it too high, otherwise this armor will break. Be very careful with the armor, and we'll kind of get into that with the accessories, but legs come up that high. Double jointed knees, that looks good. Ankles, they're on a swivel, very similar to Figma joints. Very nice rocker on them, and yeah, they go up and down, so that's good enough. And her legs, they split out decently well. Again, don't force it. This is like a soft piece on the crotch, so ball joints in there, so be aware of that. And they go back decently well. So pretty basic articulation, but can't complain because it works well. Elbows are just single jointed, so you barely get 90 degrees, not even. That's a little disappointing, especially for figures that are supposed to be warriors. So a little disappointing there. No butterfly movement. So again, basic articulation, but good enough. And what is also disappointing is no lower kind of joint in the waist, so no ball joint down there, which would have been great. So that's a little disappointing for figures that are supposed to be like essentially killing each other. So could have done much better there. In terms of articulation, yeah, good enough. But in terms of engineering, this is where some serious issues come up. Now, Vlattia was fine. Okay, but now you're going to see some serious issues when we talk about Berenice and what happened to mine, and I'll actually put some pictures up. Yeah, her ankles just snapped. Okay, so I actually had to do literal surgery. And keep in mind, I've been collecting figures for a long time. I'm pretty careful with my figures. I heat them, I put sewing oil, I baby them. So even after heating, trying to get her ankles out resulted in them breaking. Now what I had to do was actually, the joint was stuck and there was no way in hell that it was coming out. I used a drill, I used heat, I used a needle, everything. That joint was just jammed in there. And I'll show pictures. What I ended up having to do was drill a new hole in there, okay, with the drill, with a little hand saw, a hand drill. So I had to put in a Figma joint. Okay, if you see that right there. Now, it kind of worked out for the best because this joint blows theirs out of the water. Okay, so this is way smoother and way stronger. Okay, so, and I was lucky enough to have a set that matched her skin tone pretty well. So she didn't lose any functionality. But do you think your average buyer is just going to be able to kind of do that? I don't think so. And people don't really have the patience to do that. Yeah, so be aware of that. This is like a $60 figure, and they're way more expensive now. Good luck trying to find them. If you do want to find them, I know AliExpress sometimes carries them, but not so sure anymore. That is extremely annoying. Okay, so you shouldn't have to deal with that at this price point. Now, what annoyed me even more was the fact that when I got into contact with XesRay, they made no attempts whatsoever to replace the damaged parts. And that's probably what pissed me off the most. They told me to just get in touch with the seller, which is BS. I very much doubt the seller just carries spare parts like that. I got mine from Empire Toy Shop. I emailed them, got no response from them either. So be aware of that. And I'm not in the habit of asking for refunds. I just fix my figures. So there you go. If you're willing to go through that, go for it. but if not, I'd tell you to steer well away from these figures. As good as they look, the joints are absolute garbage. For the fact that these figures are advertised as extremely customizable and that you could pop and swap the armor pieces, hell no. So the joints come in like a, and let me see if I have an example. Yeah, right here. So this is actually one of her old joints. Keep in mind, this is filed down. They use an insane mushroom tip design for the joints here. This is actually filed down. I filed this down with a little jeweler's file. This was an aggressive mushroom shaped tip. If you ever played Ninja Gaiden, just look at Hayabusa's Demon Slayer bow. This looks almost like the arrow that he uses. Like, it'll literally hook into something and tear it to pieces. Okay, so this is what they're using to connect their joints, and that's just straight up garbage for figures that are meant to be swapped and rearranged with armors and you name it. So these dig in, and they're extremely hard to pull out. And good luck heating your figures like they say on a tiny piece of paper. That's not going to help you. That's just going to fray, warp, and damage these joints. Be very careful. These joints are straight garbage. Okay, so I hate them, and I'm lucky that Vlattia didn't break. And if you think that it was a one-off incident, it wasn't, because this is actually a replacement Tadala figure, and I just remembered. And I'll show pictures because I have a second figure, the one that broke. Guess what? It was the ankles again. Okay, so the ankles are notoriously weak, and I had to put Figma joints in that one too. So I have a fodder Tadala just lying around, but her ankles broke too. Now, actually, take a look here. Do you see that? I filed this joint down to actually make it safe to play with. Okay, so now I could actually safely rearrange armor pieces and things like that. If you're willing to do that, go for it. Because if you don't do that, you're very likely going to break these figures. And just take my word for it. If you're not ready to kind of like get in there and do this with like a little jeweler's file, don't buy these figures. So they're not the best in that regard. Okay, so I'm really dedicating a long time for like the articulation engineering section, because this is where these figures suck the hardest. And the fact that this company didn't even kind of make any attempt whatsoever to replace parts from their garbage engineering, that's what pissed me off the most. Okay, so be aware of that. Don't get ripped off by these people. You could still go for these figures if you really like them, but be aware of what you're getting into. So they try to come off as like the Mythic Legions line, and if you owned any of those, much easier to deal with. I hope they improve, and I'm not going easy on them because, you know, they're a company. I have no sympathy for them. They're selling things for a pretty steep price point as a new company, and this is not quality that I'm willing to deal with. So very disappointing in that regard. Okay, so for articulation / engineering, easy 2 out of 5. Okay, because I don't like when people BS people out of their money. Okay, like, these are expensive. You shouldn't have to get in there and dig down with a jeweler's file and all this other garbage to get them workable. Okay, so that's just unacceptable. 2 out of 5 easily, and they deserve that. Okay, let's get into accessories. Now, with accessories, they were very generous. Okay, so the armor pieces, you could count those as accessories. Plenty of accessories in that regard. They come with tons of weapons. And let me actually just show you what they look like fully armored up. So, start with Vlattia. Head comes off. Okay, I mean, her hair comes off. And you just slide the helmet on. Just got to line the eyes up well. A little tricky sometimes. And that is really cool. And Mythic Legions does this too, where you can actually see their eyes through the helmet. That looks sick. Okay, so that looks sick. And let me just put her armor on. Now, keep in mind the armor is pretty hard to get off when you first get these figures. So be aware of that. Use hot water, use sewing oil, whatever you need to do. You already know that by now. Let's just slide her thigh piece on, shin piece. There's Vlattia all armored up. Pretty easy to get them to stand. Very stable figures. So that's her. And let's do Berenice also. Let's get them all standing next to each other. And now let's do Tadala. Let's just not lose their hair. Let's keep this sorted. And yeah, I really broke my figures in, which is why I could swap these pieces so easily. Again, be very careful. These are not the easiest to swap around, so go slow. And keep in mind, heat them liberally. I hope your joints don't break. I had them break on 2 of mine. Let's get her standing in somewhat of a non-zombified pose. And yeah, her ankle joints, these joints, again, I broke mine in. Very squeaky, very kind of stiff, unless you really boil these figures down. Okay, so again, yeah, they do look great together. Before I forget, one thing you should know about Tadala's armor, another thing that really annoyed me. Do you see those kind of clasps on her armor? Completely non-functional. And if you saw people, I've seen people on the internet complain, those clasps do not hook in. So they're only in the first time you buy the figure. If you take them out, good luck trying to get them back in, because they use a very soft, gummy plastic. They do not latch back into those kind of like holes in there. So I just cut mine off because I already had another copy of this figure. They look absolutely hideous once they get like kind of worn out. So I just snipped off those little pieces there, and much easier to take this piece on and off for swapping armor and things like that. So be aware of that. Very badly designed. This armor does not hook in properly. One last thing with the accessories, be careful. These accessories are very brittle. So it feels like this could snap very easily. Okay, so they look great, but they're very sharp. Okay, and I hate when accessories are too sharp, like that's not necessary. And that usually just means they're extremely brittle. So be careful, don't shank yourself with these. And yeah, be very careful. These could easily snap. I could feel it right now. Okay, so in terms of accessories, I'd still give them a 4-star rating, just because the armor looks great, and the fact that the accessories look gorgeous in and of themselves, and the fact that you could swap these around, very fun to deal with. So, 4-star rating for the accessories. In terms of overall value, I'd have to say these figures only get a 2.5 from me. So they're around $60 to $70 at MSRP. Keep in mind these figures, and I know like for a fact that Vlattia, Berenice are extremely expensive now. So just from what I've seen recently, you could check AliExpress. I know prices kind of change all the time, but I don't think these are so easy to get anymore. This is more so just a warning because of the fact that this company is releasing more figures, and I don't want people to walk into these without knowing kind of the BS that I had to deal with these. So they look great, but don't get suckered in. If you know what you're doing like I do with these figures, go for it. But be aware. Okay, so if you are going to buy them, buy yourself some hobby tools with it, a jeweler's file, things like that. Okay, so you're probably going to need them. Don't joke yourself if you think you're going to have an easy time with these absolutely disgusting, aggressive joints that just dig into the plastic. You need to shave these down like I did. Otherwise, you're going to have a real nightmare dealing with these. Other than that, yeah, so accessories, I mean, in terms of overall value, only 2.5 out of 5. So these figures are pretty terrible value for the money. If you consider the fact that these figures could break, because the joints as they are now, in my opinion, are using some really bad quality plastic. They broke on 2 of mine. even after heating them generously. So in my opinion, the plastic quality in the joints, at least, is absolutely terrible. So the fact that these $60, $70 figures starting price snap so easily and break, and the fact that it's so hard to get them apart, easily 2.5 out of 5. Do not buy these figures if you're new to action figures, because you're not going to have fun. All right, so I've seen people really bummed out because they wasted like $180 on the full set of 3, and then one of them broke and they had no idea how to fix it. It's not easy to fix it. I literally had to drill a new hole into their cabs to kind of like get a new joint in there, and you had to find a bag of joints too. So good luck with that. Overall, that gives them a rating of 3.1, 3.12. So be careful. Okay, so I can't really recommend these figures the way they are. If you're into the aesthetic as much as I am, you probably will buy them, and I only will buy more of these just because I know how to fix them. And I sincerely hope they did fix some of these issues, because this is just disgustingly unacceptable the way they are now. And the customer service is garbage too. Okay, so I'm not a very picky person, but the fact that you're not even willing to kind of send in a replacement part for something as simple as a joint is disgusting. So telling your buyer, the people who are keeping your company alive, to go ask the seller for parts, that doesn't cut it. Okay, so distributors, I wouldn't expect a distributor to carry a bag of ankles or things like that just on hand. That's your job. Okay, then I've seen other companies gladly replace parts. And I'll mention one right now, Joy Toy. Okay, so they have an online dedicated service to replace missing joints. And you only have to pay a small fee, like $5 or something. I wish other companies did the same, or at the very least do something in terms of just making the buyer whole. Okay, in terms of overall scaling, so like I said before, these are 6.5-inch scale figures. So if you're into the loose collector line, yeah, she's right around the same height as them. Oh, and she's an infinitely better figure than them too. Major respect to loose collectors. Probably one of my favorite companies this year. They listen, and they definitely improve their figures, in my opinion. So she's exactly the same height as them. So she matches the whole aesthetic too. So this is just a random figure. Forgot her name, actually. Pocket Arts figure. I think her name is Hasuki or something. Yeah, PA02 Pocket Arts. She's pretty tall. There you go. And if you want a traditional 6-inch figure, just take a look at Gundam Universe. They're pretty much exactly 6 inches tall. Yeah, so they do stand a head taller than those figures. Be aware of that. And yeah, overall, they look pretty decent. I'd say they fit in pretty well. They're not monstrously sized. They look like pretty dangerous kind of fighting women. 6.5 inches seems decent. Could have some fun posing there. But yeah, they look great in terms of overall size. Can't really complain there. Okay, and finally, I just want to show how these figures could essentially swap armor parts very well. Getting them to this stage, pain in the ass. Again, just all the kind of sanding down and things you gotta do to safely take these figures apart. Real pain. But in the end, for me, yeah, you can't beat this look. Like, these look amazing to me. And yeah, I had all their armor swapped out, and looks great. So I hope they figure out how to do the joints better, because the way they are now is ridiculous. And I'm praying that the newer waves, which I will be getting, get rid of that like annoying mushroom shaped peg, because that just wreaks havoc on the plastic. Straight pegs like Mafex knows what they're doing. If you saw my RoboCop review, that's the only way you should be doing it for figures like this. Or at the very least, ease off the kind of like how bulky that mushroom shaped peg is, right? Because you want it to get in and out like kind of easily, right? So that's going to be something that they really need to deal with. Otherwise, these figures pretty annoying to deal with overall. But Again, I'm a sucker for these kind of swords and sandals type aesthetics, so I will be getting them, and I know how to fix them, but be wary, because if you're not a DIY type person, and if you don't want to waste your time dealing with that, and you just want to figure out of the box that works, these are not for you, unless they've made some serious changes. Okay, and that's pretty much the end of my video, and yeah, feel free to subscribe. Again, I go into hyper detail with these figures, so it took me a while to get this review out, because, yeah, I wanted people to know the truth. So they look great, but know that they're a pain in the ass, and wouldn't recommend them to someone new to the hobby. Be very careful. If you're good at fixing your figures, go for it. If you're not, trust me, you're going to have a bad time. Okay, so that's my review of these figures. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you want a tutorial how to fix broken joints like this one and this one had the misfortune of experiencing, let me know and I'll show you how to do it. Not easy, okay, but definitely a lifesaver if you deal with figures like this. All right, so that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Take care.